Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 147. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in the state of Ohio, we have a very, very, very special guest, Chris Cosme. Chris, how's it going?
How's it going, Joe? I'm feeling pretty good. Quickly, I just want to say I've been listening to the show for a long time. So it's almost like surreal to even be on it. But I'm honored to even have the opportunity to be here. Um, yeah, I never thought for a second that I would, you know, podcast I've been listening to forever that I'd be on one of the episodes. So
You know what, man? I think this is going to be one of my favorite episodes because I've gotten to know you over the past year plus, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But every conversation that we've been a part of together, I feel like there's more and more wisdom that just you throw out into the universe. And in addition to the wisdom, you have such a deep story that I've only heard bits and pieces of. And I would really love to hear the whole thing. So before we get into any of that, how would you introduce yourself to people listening who have no idea who Chris Cosme is?
hey, well, my name is Christopher Cosme. I'm 33 years old, currently living in Ohio. Small city, well, not that small, but called Lorraine, pretty close to Cleveland. I was born in Puerto Rico. Parents moved us to New York City, where my mom's natively from, when I was two. 2 years later, we moved to Jersey City, uh, where I pretty much grew up until the age of 12, where we decided to move here to Ohio, mostly because my parents just wanted to change of pace, and my brother had gotten engaged. His fiance lived here, and so my parents just kind of fell in love with it. Um, I'm a son, brother to one older brother and my younger sister. Um, I went into so straight out of high school, I went into the military. It was kind of like a lifelong dream. So went straight into the army out of high school. 6 years there, got out, and decided I hadn't had my fill just yet. So 3 months later, I was right back in the recruiter's office and going back in. But this time I did 6 years with the Air Force. So we changed branches. Fast forward to today, currently work for pretty well known sports apparel brand. Leave it anonymous for now. Um, and on the side, just kind of I'm a hybrid athlete. Um, just kind of trying my hand at any type of event that just kind of looks like it's got my name on it. So
Man, there's so much I want to dig into. And maybe the best place to start with all of this, Chris, is by just asking you the first big question of the podcast, and we'll see where it takes us. So, when you look back at your life this far, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not choose for yourself?
for me, it would be to be losing my dad. Um, I don't think there's anything in life that prepares you for like losing anybody, let alone like a family member, your parents, right? And I still remember like the day and the time. I remember getting the phone call. it was a friend of his that called, um, and he didn't really know what to say. He just kind of told me, "Hey, like, they found your dad at the church that he was in, right? He was spending a couple of nights at the church, kind of like in a vigil on his own, and he had a heart attack uh, going down the steps. And that's kind of where they found him. So, and getting that phone call, I remember at first I it was so surreal that I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was maybe like a prank or something. My dad was a bit of a jokester, even more so than I am. But and then for a split second, I was a little bit upset. I was like, if this guy's playing a prank on me right now like this, I don't know if I could forgive him for this one. And then it really did sink in, like it wasn't a prank, it wasn't a joke. It was real.
Mhm,
And I remember walking outside of my house at the time. My mom was like mowing the lawn, and I remember going out, and I think she knew immediately like what I was gonna say. I remember she looked up, she stopped the mower, and like I'll never forget the reaction on her face. But um, she came running over and she asked what's wrong, and I was like, they just called and they said that dad passed away. Um, and that kind of set things into motion. I had to notify my brother, my sister. We had to go to the church because the police needed to speak with us, and I wasn't actually allowed to see the body or anything. They just kind of had me identify him via his ID.
mm,
Um, even the whole ordeal was just so crazy because we couldn't even start like funeral processes or anything for a couple of days because they needed to investigate whether you know any malplay had taken place. So um but like not even being able to, I was just kind of watching everybody else having to like do the grieving, like for me, like always being like the anchor of the family, being the person that like was known for just showing strength and having the answers when people needed them and whatnot. I didn't even really have a chance to grieve until it was all kind of over. Um, and it's kind of funny because later on, a lot of the family members kind of came over, and they were like, because of the strength that you showed, like we were able to grieve, but I kind of had to, grieve on my own uh, later on. I would say, I guess the biggest thing that brought peace to me and during that week was that I was able to make amends with my dad a week prior to him passing away, and we didn't always have like the best relationship. My my dad was a really great human being when I was a child, and when I reached like my teenage years, um, I think it's kind of where like a lot of his demons kind of started to show, where he was kind of like in this phase of like wanting better for me and like wanting me to like walk a different path than he did, but not really knowing how to steer me down that path, right? And for a while I always thought like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, every the days that I need him, he's not there. When I don't need him, he's there. Never quite has like the words that I need or whatnot. And you know, and as a kid, you're like learning about life and experiencing things, and you have such a real shallow like perspective on what life is, and
mm,
see your parents as like these godlike beings that are supposed to just be perfect, and you don't know their history or where they come from or what they had to deal with. and whatnot. And as I got older, there was like small moments where my dad would open up and kind of like talk about his past, briefly, because it's very obvious that it would just open up wounds, and it's just stuff that he just never wanted to address. Um, and I came to a point, probably around the time where before I went into the military, that I could go forever resenting like what I didn't get, or I could acknowledge the fact that he did the best he could, right? And I came to that kind of perspective on things where it's like, he didn't have the best childhood, right? Didn't made a lot of mistakes, and not everyone, not everyone's prepared to be a parent. Um, I think it's easy to raise like kids, but when they get into their teenage years and adult life, and they start asking the serious questions, and they're looking for that direction, and you don't really have the answers, it's not a lot of people, can like step up to the plate and figure that out, and I think that was just kind of like where he was stuck at, where I knew he wanted better for me. I knew he'd be happy of the man I am today.
Mm,
Um, but he just didn't have a way to show it, like to teach me. And I'm glad I made peace with him on that, made amends on that. And it definitely, as difficult as that week was when he passed, it definitely alleviated, kind of like any sense of guilt or unnecessary stress or whatnot with the situation.
mm. Would you say that the realization that we're all imperfect people just doing the best with what we have was part of the reason you were able to make peace with your dad for the ways that maybe he led you, but you were hoping would be different?
Yeah, I would say I think the realization of like noticing my own mistakes and my own pitfalls and deviations from the path that I should have been walking. Um, I think my own like limited perspective on things, just things that I didn't understand at that time, which is a lot of stuff as a kid that you don't understand.
Mm,
And I think the realization of that like, well, how can I judge him based on his imperfections, his mistakes, his upbringing that I had no part of, when I'm also an imperfect human being, who's still trying to figure, like, no one ever has life figured out. It's just like this daily thing of like learning something, and then life throws something else your way and that you've never seen before, that now you have to learn, and it never stops. It's just constant pursuit of like having to learn how to deal with tomorrow over and over and over again, right? So, if I'd sat there and just resented the man and uh, judged him for every single mistake that he made, then while also doing the same things, then I'm no better than he is. I'm no better than anybody else is. So I think I kind of came to the realization that I could either live in the shadow of trying to not be him,
mm,
or set myself free and say it's not about being like him or not being like him. It's about being you, right? This is your life. This is your chance to go out there and like prove to the world like who you are, or what you want to be, what you want to do. Become the man that you want to be, right? Maybe you didn't have the example, but you know, parents are supposed to raise you until you're about 18 years old, and then you kind of have to go and figure out life, right? So we can't sit here and just, I can't sit there and just say, oh well, the next 50 years of my life are just going to be this way because I didn't have this stuff, right? Like, well, maybe I wasn't given it to it, but what's stopping me from pursuing it, right? And finding it or creating it.
and we can't step out into the light of who we are if we choose to live in the shadows of those that walk before us. It's a really interesting point, and of course, it applies to the parent-child relationship. And I would guess for a lot of people, those that we look up to cast shadows, and if we choose to follow so closely that we stay in those shadows, we risk never being able to step out into the light to see who we are and who only we can be. And that's an interesting realization that I'm curious if it's tied back to some of those mistakes that you had made that you referenced, and maybe that deviation from the path, losing yourself to then find yourself again. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and also maybe more about some of those tough times you went through as a teenager and a young adult.
Yeah, so so I'll take it back to, like, even earlier than that. So, as a kid, um, I had to kinda grow up quickly, right? I
Mm,
didn't my parents, especially my mom, she did what she could to, like, protect me from, you know, the world and life, right, which is what most parents want to do. Um, but, I kind of fell into the role of, like, having to take on a lot of responsibility in the household to make sure things were the way they needed to be. Like, my mom was always out working, trying to provide and keep a roof over our head and keep food on the table. So, I was the one that was always looking after my sister, like, babysitting and doing that. Household chores, just kind of taking on, like, all the load. A lot of times just being an ear for, like, when my parents needed to vent, and they take turns, and just having that pressure of, like, you know I kinda just kinda wanna be a child
mm,
and explore life, right? And here I am being a mediator for 2 adults
mm,
on things that I have no idea, uh, like, what they're talking about. And in school, I was an excellent student, always had a knack for learning, and it's still a thing. I'm very curious about life and just about everything under the sun. But I had a hard time, like, just trying to relate to kids my age, mostly because I just felt they were a little bit more childish to me, just didn't have the responsibilities that I had. And so I was more interested in, like, spending more time with adults. And I spent a lot more time conversing with my teachers and people that were way, way, way older than me, curious about their lives and how they handled, you know, situations and problems that came their way, and uh, kind of like what not to do and what to do. And and so that kind of created, like, this space where I always kind of felt like I was a little bit lost. Um, and so part of the reason that I went into the military wasn't just because it was like a lifelong goal, right? Because I had other aspirations. As a kid, I still love to this day. I'm a huge Formula One fan, and I'd seen that as a kid. I was like, "This is what I want to do," right? Because that's what you do as kids. You see something, you're like, "Oh, I want to do this," right? Well, that's what I wanted to do. Uh, Quickly came to the realization that we were not rich, and it costs a lot of money to get into Formula One. So I was like, "Okay, well, that's not going to be a possibility, right?" And so I turned to, like, the next thing, which was baseball. I had a huge love for baseball. Was pretty good at it, but my dad wouldn't let me play on any of the teams, no matter how hard the uh, the staff at the schools advocated for it. Just he wouldn't allow it. Right. At the time where I got old enough to even play for any of these teams, my dad kind of went down and I don't mean this in a bad way, but he kind of went down, like, the religious route, but in a very, very strict uh, form. So his reasoning to why he wouldn't allow me to go into sports and stuff was that it would take too much time away from being, and, being a young kid, I didn't really have a say in the matter. If your parents didn't approve, you couldn't do anything. That's just the way it was. So part of the reason I went into the military was to kind of find out who I was. right? I needed to lay a foundation under me of who I was, who I wanted to be, right? What I could handle, what I couldn't handle. I didn't know what my strengths and weaknesses were. And so I said, what better way to find out than to just throw myself into the gauntlet, right? And so that's what I did. And along the way, uh, I learned a lot about myself, about how I react under pressure, how I handle high stress environments, how I work in a team setting, whether I'm a follower or a leader. Um, I think to be a good leader, you also have to be a good follower. Um, and so I kind of started to like build the foundation of who I wanted to be as a man, right? And along the way, right around like probably about 3 or 4 years before I got out completely, so I was in the Air Force at that time. I kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but I kind of just like lost
Mm,
my way. Right? That person that I was trying to find, um, somehow I just like couldn't see the path anymore. And that kind of started like a big downward spiral in my life, which kind of led to um, the pivot 3 years ago when I, made the decision to pretty much become who I am today. But at that time, without knowing, I didn't know how deep that hole was going to go. Couldn't see that at that time, but it was kind of like living for those years, like with this huge, like this thick mental fog of not really being able to see a path ahead, not being able to see what I should do or where I should go, who I should look up to. I was just kind of just spinning in circles.
mm,
Um, and they just got worse, right? It got worse throughout those years, kind of culminating um, around that fourth year with me just kind of hitting like an all-time low. And I find myself in a dark place. Had a lot of depression issues at that time. Had a lot of anxiety at that time. Didn't know how to manage like that kind of stress. Just kind of felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I didn't want to let anybody down.
mm,
But in the process, I was losing myself,
mm,
and I was trying to cope with how can I, continue to be what everybody else needs me to be, but at the same time sacrifice who I'm supposed to be in the process or who I want to be. And um, it kept spiraling downhill to the point where I was suicidal, right? And I think along that time, so I had come to the point of attempting suicide 3 times, and so I would say, and it sounds crazy speaking about it now, or the way it's going to sound, but the first 2 times I chickened out, right? And it's just the way you think when you're in that state, it's crazy. Um, and the last time, which was almost 4 years ago now, looking back on it, I remember that I was really just in this place where I was convinced 100% that this was it, right?
mm,
And for 2 whole weeks, I had this internal battle, and it's almost like it's hard to explain, but it's almost like having like someone literally following you around like 24/7 who's just like telling you like just do it. Just do it. Just do it. That's all you hear all day long. Just do it. It's like this voice in your head that's just like just do it. Just do it. Just do it, right? To the point where I could almost daily I could hear like the gunshot going off. And it got so bad that I literally had to lock away like my guns as a preventative to keep myself from from doing it, right? Because it would at least give me time to think about it first. And right around that second week of dealing with this, uh, I remember just laying on the floor in my bedroom, just laid out on the floor, just staring at the ceiling, just kind of like screaming at the top of my lungs, and um, and I was crying, and it was just a mess, but um, in my mind, I wasn't ready to die yet, and I didn't want to die at that time, and it wasn't because of like, um, oh, I don't want to let people down or anything like that. It was really just a realization that I didn't want to leave this world knowing that if I had just given it one more chance, I could have done something special. And, looking back at it now, I remember the next day, as soon as I woke up in the morning, I wrote in my journal and I dated it, and I dated it for the following year. And I dated it for the following year, and I said, if you're reading this, um, I hope it was worth giving yourself another chance. And I'm glad I did.
I'm glad you did too, man. You're getting a bit emotional, which I can understand. What's what's running through your mind at this moment, talking back through all of that? I have tears in my eyes, and I'm just listening.
Um, Honestly, it's just like reliving it, like just picturing kind of like where I was at that time and like how far I've come since then. Um, Shortly after that, I kind of just had a conversation with myself in the mirror, and it was a legitimate like conversation with myself. As crazy as that sounds, um, but I kind of just looked at this person that was looking back at me in the mirror and just kind of took accountability for who that person was and who that person should be, and admitting to myself that I was the reason why
Mm,
um, that person wasn't living the life that they yearned to live and wasn't showing the world the best version of themselves that they wanted to be. And that was a very difficult but necessary conversation. Just coming to that realization of like, you are who you are and you feel the way you feel, you look the way you look because of me, right? Because haven't done, I haven't made the best choices for us,
mm,
right? I haven't, uh, I haven't set that example for us that we need. I wasn't chasing those dreams and aspirations that we needed, right? Me and that person in the mirror. And, shortly after that, it was the first week of December, I just kind of made the commitment then and there that that was enough, that never again would I put myself in the position to feel that way. Uh, Never again was I going to choose to not not put that effort to be that better person, because honestly, that would have been me choosing the easy way out, right? As difficult as that may sound, some people may hear it and say, "Well, that's a difficult decision to make to even like end your life like that." But it's actually the act itself is very easy. At one moment you're there, and the next moment you're not, right? And I don't say that lightly. I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, both in the military and out. Friends that just nobody reached out to on time, right?
Mm,
Um, or had the mental breakthrough that I had. Um,
mm,
but I decided that was it. That we weren't gonna walk down that path anymore, and that it wouldn't do anybody else that was currently in the same situation any good. Just have another the only example be that they did exactly what everybody else has done before,
mm.
right? And it takes a lot to walk yourself off that edge. Um, it's even harder to do it just on your own like that. Um, but I try to live my life every day, you know, intentionally trying to be the best version of myself. And when people ask me what drives me and how I stay motivated to do the things that I do, just in life in general, even when I don't want to, it's that guy. It's that version of me, and I see him every day. Every day that every day that I get up, I see that old version of me. Every day that I don't want to do something that I should be doing, I see that version of me. Right? Every day that I think about giving in, right? Like, oh, this is too hard. Why are we doing this? We could easily just do this over here. We could take the day off today. We could do that, right? Um, I see that guy all the time, right? And I always say that that guy, he's always one day away from just creeping back in, right? That one day that I slip, that one day that I decide not to honor that pledge that I made to myself that day, there he is, and he's gonna have to keep waiting. Yeah,
Ugh, I love every bit of that, and it makes sense to me. It all makes sense. We've been working together for what, over a year now, right? Year and
yeah,
change. In a fitness capacity, writing your workouts, programming your runs, progressing everything, and you don't miss workouts. Chris doesn't miss lifts. Chris doesn't miss workouts. If there's 8 reps, he's hitting 8 reps. If there's 10 reps, he's hitting 10 reps. And it's almost machine like. Um, and I say that, you know, I'm joking, but I'm not. And it all clicks because now I can envision what you're picturing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and it makes sense why you push the way you push. With that being said, not everybody who goes through hard times like you just described makes it out alive or makes it out as a better version of themselves. And there's an Ernest Hemingway quote that I'll read and then I would love your thoughts, but he said, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken places. But those that will not break, it kills. It kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry." And so that part about, you know, the world breaks everyone and afterward many are strong at the broken places just hits me. And I can picture you at rock bottom building from that place, broken at the bottom but not defeated. What does that mean to you, and what goes through your mind when you hear that?
a great quote. Um, I think that the way I see it is like the life is not about like going around like living it unbroken, right? It's about letting yourself be broken and picking yourself back up again from the pieces, right? Um, it's im- I don't think it's possible to go around just thinking like, "Oh, I'm completely unbreakable. Nothing can beat me, nothing," because hardship is where we learn life's most precious lessons. Right? It's where all the growth is, where all the development is, and you kind of have to allow yourself to be broken, to realize like, okay, maybe that version of myself wasn't enough for this next level, right? This next level just there's just a bit more pressure this next level. And if we're gonna make it, we gotta let the old version break and then use those pieces to forge a new version of yourself that's gonna be able to handle this new uh stress, right? This new level of pressure, this new storm that life has thrown your way. And so, listening to that quote, that's the way I see it. It's not like it's not trying to be unbroken, or unbreakable. It's not about trying to run away from, life's many, many tests. It's just about, uh, just embracing it, taking it in and just realizing that everything that you did up to this point, is all great. It's built the version of you, but tomorrow you're gonna need to learn something else to make it through tomorrow.
Mm,
And the next day is gonna do the same thing. It's like, "That's great. You did everything you needed to do to make it through yesterday," right? Or maybe you didn't. Maybe it was just an off day. Maybe that test was just a little bit too hard that day, and so tomorrow you have another chance at it. But I can guarantee you as soon as you pass that test, life's just gonna throw another one your way, and it's every single one is a never seen before scenario. Right? It's like, well, I know how to do everything else prior to this. I know what it takes to get here, but you have no idea what it takes to get to the next level. But life does.
mm,
Life does. And so it throws everything that it knows you need that you haven't even thought about yet. It throws that at you. And how long it takes for you to learn that lesson, that's going to be on you, right? But just know that once you do learn it, life's got another one just ready to fire off at your way, and it just it's a repeat cycle. It's a
mm,
repeat cycle. So we kind of have to let ourselves get broken.
mm. Yeah, what got you here won't get you there, or as it goes, new seasons require new strategies, new levels have new devils. The sayings are numerous, but the point is the same. Life doesn't get easier. Every day there's a new challenge. Every test we pass, there's another one waiting for us. And one of the things I love that you've said recently on social media and to our small group, Team Endure, is stay rebellious. And I you are a rebellious person to me in a lot of different ways, but I would love for you to break down stay rebellious and what that looks like when it comes to just navigating life.
Yeah, it's my mantra for the year. I think I kind of discovered it's kind of been my lifelong mantra without even knowing it. But you know, part of the reason of how I came up with that, um, I think so. Human beings, like just by nature, are just rebellious, right? When you look at like everything we've done and everything we've accomplished, we kind of like defy like a lot of laws of nature, right? We were not meant to fly. We don't have wings, right? But it didn't stop us. We said, you know what? We weren't born with wings, but I want to fly. And so we created, planes and hot air balloons and all these other inventions to give us that opportunity. Right? We weren't really meant to explore the oceans the way that we do, right? But here we are, boats, jet skis, submarines, just you know, um, doing all these things that are just not in our nature, right? Like lions don't look around like, man, I really wish I can go scuba diving, right? Like the nature doesn't go around doing these things, but we do. We humans do. We go around and say maybe these were the this is the hand that we were dealt, but I refuse to live by that. And we go and just create and forge a whole new path for ourselves, right? Which is just an act of rebellion on its own. You deciding to better yourself, to go on this pursuit of like personal development is an act of rebellion against yourself, right? Me deciding almost 4 years ago to say, hey, I'm not happy with this like status quo that I've built for my life and I'm going to change it. That was an act of rebellion to say, like, yes, that might have been the version of me at that time, but I refuse to let that continue to be the version that I need to be. And so choosing to do the opposite of everything I had been doing for years is an act of rebellion, right? Deciding that I'm gonna wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like if you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, what's the first thing your brain does as soon as that alarm clock goes off, right? On those days that you don't automatically wake up, first thing your brain says is like, "Ah, you can go ahead and snooze that, man. Like we don't have to get
Mhm,
up today.
mhm,
Like we could take 30 more minutes, right? The gym is still gonna be there. We'll be all right." Right? You make it to the gym and you say like I'll look at the programming and I'm like, I don't know, Joe. Like, I don't know if we need to do 265 today, right? Like, maybe it'll be
mm,
alright if we do 225. What's
mhm,
the difference, right?
mhm,
But deciding like, no, this is the line that we're gonna hold. That's
mm,
an act of rebellion. Rebelling against your own human nature of like constantly wanting to do less, right? Because our brain is just kind of wired to keep us alive for 24 hours on as little energy as possible. Right.
mm.
So anytime we try to do anything outside of that norms, it's immediately just challenging you and challenging you and challenging you. And so, that whole act of, this mantra of like stay rebellious is just that, like continuing to just rebel against yourself, continuing to rebel against anything that just kind of gets in your way that's preventing you from being you, right? Like, okay, well, society says you should do this. That's cool. Everyone says you should do this. Everyone says you should speak like this. Everyone says you should. This is how everyone wears their clothes. This is how, and like, well, that's fine. But I'm not everybody. I'm me, right? I'm me. I am Chris Cosme, one of one, right? Like, sure, many people are gonna be born every day that are gonna be smarter than me, better looking than me, have a much nicer starting plate, but there's never gonna be another me, right? Everyone's uniquely themselves, and um, just choosing to just be that person every day and holding that standard regardless of like how hard it is today. Like, hey, I just don't feel like going to the gym today. I don't feel like choosing personal excellence every single day. But uh if there's anything I've learned in life is you have two choices. You can choose your hards, or you can let life choose them for you. And I've been on both ends of those spectrums, and I can tell you that letting life choose them for you is going to be a lot harder than you choosing them for yourself. And it's still gonna throw the hards at you, but you're just a lot more prepared to deal with those hards because you voluntarily put yourself through hard things every day as is. Right? So you've kinda conditioned yourself to be able to handle difficult situations because you voluntarily do it every day, whether that's in the gym, whether that's just choosing to do that little thing like, yeah, sure, it's like someone tossed a little can of Coke on the ground, left it there. Well, you could say, "I'm just gonna leave it there," right? Or I can say, "Okay, well, maybe he left it there, but I'll pick it up. I'll clean it up," right? You don't know if someone else is watching you from across the street and say, "Well, that little act right there is enough to inspire me to try to do something equal to that today," right? You just don't know like what or who like you're inspiring, but I can tell you that if you don't decide to, like, be that better version of yourself every day, I mean, then you're not inspiring anybody at all, right? So, choose your hard.
So good. So I'll go back here for a second and say, I was going to ask you, what's the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose? And just to check that box, I think you described the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose was almost 4 years ago, choosing to be this version of Chris Cosme and fight against that resistance and be rebellious in that way. And I love the concept of being rebellious because the image I got in my mind was this still water, everybody goes with the flow, and you throw in this pebble and you create ripples and resistance. Pushing into resistance is rebellion, and rebellion creates ripples. And those ripples spread out to all those around us, whether it's picking up a piece of garbage, getting to the gym early in the morning, doing that other hard thing that is going to inspire somebody else. That creates positive ripples so that others can rebel, and choosing personal excellence is rebellion because it is hard. It's not easy. It would be much easier to hit snooze, to not do the workout, to not pick up that piece of trash. But rebellion, personal excellence, is a choice that we all have the opportunity to make every single second of every single day. you know, and the other thing I'll say is when it comes to pursuing the best version of ourselves and choosing to do hard things, you're right. It conditions us so that we can better handle the hard that life throws at us because there's no avoiding that. Going back to the idea of tests and challenges in life, giving us what we need in order to grow. This is something that you said to me, but if you ask for growth, you have to be willing to accept the growing pains. You have to expect that, right? And it's not easy, but it is worth it. And so I appreciate you sharing all that. And we'll tie this into endurance. This is the Project Endure podcast. And I'm curious for you, Chris, when you hear the word endurance, what comes to mind?
I've thought of this question a lot, just like hearing it on other podcast episodes, and um, I'll kind of paint a picture instead of like what my definition is. So when I hear endurance, I picture myself on a rowboat in the sea, staring at a storm, and I know one thing to be true: if I don't row, that storm that storm's going to be the end of me, right? And so for me, enduring is choosing, staring at that storm and saying, I see you, you know, right? And I'm going to take you on, and committing to just rowing every over and over and over again until we get over that wave, right? That 10-foot, 20-foot wave, and then it kind of calms down, come back down, and you kind of have a quick moment to breathe. And then here's another wave coming your way. And that wave's going to take just as much energy or more to get over that one, right? And every so often you get a little clear patch of like the storm's over and the sun's out and you can hear the seagulls again, and you're kind of just cruising. You can kind of like, you don't have to row as hard anymore. And then you see the next storm just kind of building over the horizon. And you just kind of know, like, well, it's that time again. It's that time again. And that loop never stops. That loop never stops until you do. And then the storm wins that day. But it's not gonna be today.
That is the most creative answer to that question that I've ever had anybody share on the podcast. And I have the chills. There's something about imagining being in the open ocean, watching a storm approach, knowing that you have a choice to make. And that sums it up so well. And I'm sure that resonated with people listening. Out of curiosity, Chris, where do you stand now? Are you in the open water with the seagulls and the sun? Are there waves crashing on you? Are you rowing real hard, or do you get a chance to rest in this season of life?
I would say I currently find myself enjoying a little bit of time with the seagulls, but I could see the next storm on the horizon, and I'm
Mm,
just kind of preparing for that.
gotcha. So, with that being said, Chris, there are people listening to this podcast like yourself who are all over the world going through all different sorts of things. Some of them are also with the seagulls, some of them are at the base of a giant wave waiting to crash down and they're rowing for their lives. If somebody's in a tough spot in the storm, struggling, maybe not sure where to go or what to do, and you get to speak right to them right now, what would you say?
don't give up. I would say don't give up. Like, I know it's hard. I know that you're dealing with a lot of external pressure, internal pressure. You don't want to let others down. You don't want to let yourself down. Um, but don't give up. Or don't let the little voice inside that's telling you that none of this is worth it. That that imposter syndrome. That it's like this is not for you. Who do you think you are chasing this? You knew this wasn't going to work, right? That little voice that creeps in and starts to create scenarios that are not even real. You're like, people don't even like me. I like ignore the noise, ignore all that noise. Don't worry about uh, what anybody else may be saying, looking from the outside in. Don't worry about the remarks that people might say as you pursue to be a better version of yourself. That knew who maybe you were before. Always want to bring up the old person, right? Just ignore all that. Ignore all the noise. Just you keep going. You keep one foot in front of the other, just like when you're running, right? Like keep one foot in front of the other. That's all you have to do. You don't have to think about anything else. You don't have to think about the pace. You don't have to think about none of that. You just keep one foot in front of the other. And I promise you, everything's going to be okay. You're going to be just fine. So just make it through this storm. The person that you'll be on the other side of it is going to thank you for it and is going to be a lot more prepared for all the other many life storms that life's going to throw your way. And it's going to prepare you not only to handle your own storms, but show people how to navigate theirs. I have a saying that I've been kind of preaching all year that, or even last year, that there's never been a more important time to live by example. And so it's a difficult choice to choose to be that person that you need to be, that other people need to see. But the rewards of that, of just seeing other people, become the best version of themselves, and you not even knowing it was because of you, right? Maybe sometimes some people come around and say, "Hey, like I just want to let you know," right? And that's a humbling feeling all in itself. But that never happens, right? Other people don't get a chance to be that version if you decide to give up today. So like the storms suck, they're hard, they'll pass. They always pass.
I've got a quote that I've shared on the podcast a few times, but it's been a while. So I'll read it again. It's from Haruki Murakami. And he said, "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you've made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about."
Absolutely.
So, Chris, stay rebellious. If people want to follow along, if they want more of this kind of conversation and content, where can they follow you? Where can they reach out and say thank you for this conversation?
You can find me. So I'm only in one place. It's just Instagram. It's under at real Chris Cosme.
I love it. Well, Chris, I appreciated this conversation. I know that it's going to impact many. And I'm just thankful that we get to work together, but more so that we get to be friends. I'm inspired by you. And thank you for all that you do, the way that you show up. And I can't wait to see what this year has in store for you.
Same, same. Appreciate you, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate the friendship. And yeah, let's bring on 2024. Let's see what it's got.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.